So James, thanks so much for taking the time for sitting down with us to talk about your new upcoming album. It's called Even in Exile. Do you want to give us a quick introduction into what it's about?
Yeah, the album is kind of loosely a concept album about one person and the people in his life. That person was called Victor Jara, and he was a singer, songwriter, a theatre director, a lecturer, a teacher, a son, a father. He came from what some people call the peasant class in Chile, but from the working class, shall we say. So he was part of a political push towards the left in Chile, and he helped get the Allende government elected in Chile. But in 1973, that government, which was a very progressive government, but not so militant as to alienate everybody, but it was a progressive government, and they were overthrown by a white right-wing military coup that was led by General Pinochet. And subsequently in that coup, Victor Jara was murdered, along with lots of other people that were connected to the Allende government and broadly to the left. So since that time, his memory, the symbol of him, the symbol of everything he stood for, has endured. You know, when I was a kid, lots of people writing songs about Victor Jara, and that's how I found out about him. And I'm the next person in line that has done the same that other musicians have done before me. Well,
let's start with the first track and then just go through the whole story on the album.
Okay. Yep.
So track number 1 is called Recuerda. Is that the reason? What's the reason that it's the first track on the album?
I think I wanted to make the connection as to why I was making an album about Victor Jara. Because, you know, I'm a Northern European. I've never been to Chile. This is very much an outsider. This is very much an outsider's, Northern European outsider's view of that period of political Chilean history, and also of Victor Jara and the people around him, of their lives. This is very much an outsider's perspective. And this is mostly about how he's inspired so many musicians to write about him, or just to write about politics. And this is about my newfound appreciation, not for his life and his history, because I always knew about his life and his history, but I discovered more about his music in this last few years than I knew before. And I like the way that he approached the protest song, as you might call it. But this song, I wanted to show why we were writing about this. Perhaps it's because it's what you might call psychogeographic empathy, where sometimes sensibilities, history, ideologies, coincidence, they all travel across hemispheres, continents, decades, because it's very strange. You know, Wales has one of the only music festivals in the world which is dedicated to Victor Jara.
Yeah, so I saw that.
Year, there's a festival in a place called Machynlleth in North Wales. So in Machynlleth, there is a musical festival dedicated to Victor Jara once every year. And that's one of the only countries in the world outside of the Spanish-speaking world where this happens. And David Ewan, who is a Welsh politician and a Welsh singer-songwriter, he wrote a song called Can Victor Jara. Can in Welsh means song. So Can Victor Jara. And up road from there is a very famous place called Lake Tryweryn, where a valley was flooded so a city in England could be supplied with water. So there are kind of echoes that go through this. How is it that Machynlleth connects to Victor Jara? Perhaps it's because of the injustice that has happened in Wales to a certain degree. That's just one example. Perhaps it's just the way that somebody that is so universal stretches across all these boundaries, across time and across hemispheres and across continents. And we just want to show that people connect to Victor Jara because he does try to voice people that are dispossessed. So that's what this song tries to signal. Recuerda when they come to your door.
Track number. Do you know the track list by heart, by the way? Because I can introduce them. You can as well if you want.
Boy From Plantation next, yeah.
That is track number 2, yeah. So I feel like this song is the biggest introduction to who Victor Jara was as a child and who he became to be. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. This song is really strange because we've talked about the Recuerda, and that's our beginning in terms of connecting to Victor Jara and his history. And then The Boy From the Plantation, the second track, is about his start in life. As we've covered before, he was born into a plantation family, what you loosely might call that. And his fate was probably resigned to working on a plantation or working in the very kind of blue-collar surroundings of where he was. And his mother brought him up because his father was mostly absent after the first 4 or 5 years of his life. And they moved to Santiago, and his mother worked because he has sisters too. And he just started learning guitar on his mother's guitar. She'd been a very good guitar player and singer, and she started teaching him. And it goes from there. There's the line, it's lungs upon your tongue, rivers of us join and run. It talks about how perhaps the mother and the son are completely interchangeable. They are one person at this point. He wouldn't be the person he is without her. That's it. She's the most important thing in his life. And she shapes him, and he learns how to express himself on that guitar. And he goes into seminary. He's thinking about becoming a priest. Then he thinks about becoming an accountant. And then he becomes much more academic and goes into theatre and acting and directs plays. And suddenly this boy that was destined for a low-paid existence is suddenly directing plays, and he's lecturing in university. And he is singing and writing songs that people are connecting to. On the street, people on the left are connecting to. And he's going to tin miners and copper miners and singing with them to try and help their cause and to try and help their plight and trying to unionize these people. And suddenly you're trying to plot the line from born into poverty, and then this, what you think is self-made, is not self-made. It's his mother that's made him too. And it's the guitar that has made him too. And it's all these little things of happenstance and fate and serendipity that have made him to be the person he is. You're never self-made. Other people make you too. Countries make you as well. And so the song is just about that. It's about that indelible bond between him, his country, his beginnings, and his mother, and his guitar.
This is The Boy From the Plantation. Track number 3 is called There Will Come a War. And this one we get a bit more into the history, I think, that Chile has, that Victor has lived through.
This is interesting for a couple of reasons. It was the second song we wrote for the record. And when I was reading it, I asked Patrick about the lyric, and he explained it was about one thing. But I saw something else in the lyric, which is okay to disagree sometimes, even though he is the author of the lyric. I think it's important what I saw when I first read it. That's equally important sometimes. Anyway, he gave me the lyric, and even though I could see the resistance in the lyric talks about the people in Chile about 2 years before Pinochet overthrows the Allende government. And it talks about, can you smell it rising from the hot bread ovens of Santiago? And he's talking about people's resistance to what the right wing was trying to do. So the right wing was spreading disinformation against the Allende government. They had SICO gangs, SICO, which were beating up anybody that were attached to unions, etc. So the 2 year run up to the coup is, you can feel this tension everywhere. And Pat wrote the lyric from the point of view of people being ready to resist that. But what I saw in the lyric was fear. And there is some fear in the lyric too. So I decided to approach it from that. I think everybody's had a moment in their lives where they've been in a situation where their fear switches on. And things don't accelerate when you have real fear. I think things become slower. Things become much more vivid. And I wanted to try and reflect that in the music. I wanted everything to be slowed down. I wanted everything to be more stark. I wanted every second to count. And I wanted time to stretch, because you've had that situation where something is bad and it seems to go on forever. So that's what I wanted to do with the track. Patrick Jones, my friend, my collaborator, my elder influence, he disagreed with my reading of the lyric, but that's okay to have disagreement with it. It's okay, you know. So this was the first song where I decided where I was going to use double bass on the record quite liberally. I played double bass on 8 to 9 other tracks, which I had to learn because it's a slightly different shape to the bass guitar. And it's quite unnerving playing an instrument which is taller than you. And I'm quite short anyway, but that's how having to look up to an instrument was quite a strange feeling.
But it worked out.
Just about.
And is Pat, I mean, just because you interpreted it differently, is he all right with the way that it came out now?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, there was no, we didn't, have a big argument about it or anything. But he was like, well, I didn't, and I was like, well, I'm doing it this way. He's like, you sure? I'm like, yeah, fuck you. He said,
all right, we'll see how it goes. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but in it's cool.
Okay, let's listen to There Will Come a War. Track number 4 is called Seeking the Room with the 3 Windows.
Yes.
And if I'm correct, it's based off of one of the most famous photographs there is of Victor Jara, which is not ironically in Chile, but in Machu Picchu in Peru.
Yes. This piece of music came towards the end of making the album. It's one of the last tracks. And there was this file of stuff that Patrick had given me. Of pictures, titles, little snippets of poems that were started and abandoned, and then I would say, "Oh, can you restart this poem?" Etc., etc. And in the file that he gave me, there was a picture of Victor Jara at Machu Picchu, where he stood, I think, just above Machu Picchu, with his guitar, and immediately you were impressed by the fact that I find it hard carrying a rucksack up a mountain. I go up a lot of mountains. He carried his fucking guitar all the way up there. I'm like, well, you get points for that. I have a friend that went to Machu Picchu. Well, Sean in the band has been to Machu Picchu, and it's the air gets very thin. Yeah,
it's not easy. No,
you've done it too, yeah?
No, I haven't, but I've considered it, and it's hard, yeah.
Right, well, so in this picture, you see joy and commitment, because he stood aloft Machu Picchu with his guitar, heroically with his poncho blowing in the wind, kind of thing. And you see that picture and you just smile. And there was a different experience to reading other stuff about Victor, because by then I'd written songs which had dealt with much more tragic circumstances. And this picture is just full of joy. And he had been to Machu Picchu when he'd done a little tour in South America to try and trace indigenous lines of the South American people, of culture, especially of South American song. Like Violeta had done, she'd gone into the outback in Chile and tried to record songs which were in danger of dying. He wanted to do the same in Bolivia and Peru. And he just wanted to be inspired by South America as a continent rather than just Chile as well. So that's what this picture is from. It's from that trip. And this trip happened just before he came back to Chile, before he was murdered. So there's that there too. But I just wanted, I saw the picture, I saw the title that Patrick had given it, and I decided just to do music, an instrumental, because for me the picture had such a organic, futuristic feel about it. It feels in the past, but it somehow feels in the future. It's all bucolic and it has nature all around it, but you have this ancient but beautiful modern civilization, slapped in the middle of, the nature itself. And you have his guitar, and you feel as if he's just grasping a future which he feels is just in front of him. So I just wrote a tune based around that because it felt inspirational, and I didn't want any other subtext except for his joy, his feeling of possibility, his feeling of just thinking, I can do this, we can do this together.
Track number 5 is called 30,000 Milk Bottles.
Yep.
And this one weighs in heavy to the sad history that Chile had to go through, basically. At least the title does.
Yes, I mean, kind of the estimate on the disappeared being a term in Chile of people that were disappeared before the Allende government was overthrown, and after especially. The amount of people that were murdered or killed or that died in poverty as a result of General Pinochet and his right-wing takeover of Chile. Mm-hmm. The estimate is 30,000 people were disappeared or murdered or kind of died as a result of what the right-wing had done there. So it may be a conservative estimate, some people say. And Patrick fused it with the symbol of a milk bottle because one of the little symbolic things that the Allende government did was that it gave all children free milk and free school, in school, and of course, Pinochet got rid of that straight away, apparently, and that echoes with something that happened in Britain under Margaret Thatcher. One of the first things she did in government was she got rid of free milk for children. And I know it seems like a very simple, tokenistic little symbol, but, if anybody has children, knows the obsession with feeding children milk to build their calcium in their bones. And when a politician just takes it away, it just speaks to the crudest and the most cold-hearted thing you can do, So, he fused the two. He fused the two symbols together for this song. This song was inspired by John Cale, who's one of my favourite artists. He was from the Velvet Underground. He was from Wales. And this has kind of got a bit of a John Cale feel to it.
Track number 6 is called Under the Mimosa Tree. This one's the one that drew out the most emotion with me. And obviously that's personal for everyone, but I really felt a vivid image, which might be because of my history with the country, what it's about, but it really triggered my memories, and I really love that song. But what's it about?
Well, kind of already, we've talked about two songs that have perhaps quite stark political references in them. But I just wanted to write about life. I didn't want to write about a politician and an activist, because and that's a massive part of Victor Jara and Joan Jara and Allende's life. You can't wash the politics out of it, so I would never try to. But I also wanted to give a background to the people and experiences that made him. And Under the Mimosa Tree is about his family time. Him and his wife Joan were very much a team. And I think she definitely wrote about it in her book, about how they would retire into their garden when they'd had a particularly bad day. And they would just retire with the family and have dinner under the mimosa tree in their garden. And I just, I'm 51 years old, I've managed to discover quite a long time ago that the best times I have are the simplest times, really. And I like that connection you can make with Joan's writing, where she describes a day where they just retired to have dinner under the mimosa tree with the children, with her and with him. I just want to depict that moment, where those moments where you shut out the world, and those moments where you just say thank you to each other for just having a nice meal, or for just being nice to each other, or you just laugh with each other, or you're just pissed off with each other, but you do it in a safe environment and it feels good. I think that's just as important part of him to reflect, because it's not him. Again, he's made by his family. He is made by not just the support of Joan. He has a partnership with Joan, and they bring up his children together. And I just, of course, everybody that sat under a mimosa tree realizes that it does have a little magical little soul. The way the leaves fall on your face when the shade is there, it's just beautiful. They're kind of strong and delicate at the same time. I just felt like it was a good reflection of what Victor's music is. It's just, it has an innate beauty, but also it's strong as well.
Track number 7 is called From the Hands of Violeta. And you've mentioned her a couple times before, but this is actually the one track that outrightly mentions her.
Yeah. I don't know if I'm playing like the amateur psychologist here, but it feels like he kind of projects himself onto Violeta to a certain degree, in tiny bit of mother surrogacy, where he described how much she had influenced him, etc., etc. In a cultural sense is all I mean. You know, it feels as if he's given her the matriarchal kind of like symbol of being. She is the mother of Chilean folk reinvention. She is the one that's protected it. She is the one that deserves the credit, and he flourishes under what she has created. And so, of course, that got me interested, and I went back and discovered a lot of her music. And then you discover her story. And of course, there's always going to be tragedy at the end. It always fucking is, isn't it? Kind of thing. You know, because people that tend to do amazing things, like herself and Victor in Chile, it tends to end badly, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And I went back and discovered some of her music. And again, I was just blown away by it. I was blown away by how it's very different to the way a modern acoustic artist tries to bear their soul. I think we caricature ourselves sometimes. We have to make our voice cracked to show our vulnerability. But somebody like Violeta Parra just sings quite strongly, but there's still a vulnerability in her voice. And there's a shakiness there because the emotion courses through her veins. You can hear her trying to control the emotion. So that makes her more vulnerable. It's not that kind of quiet, hushed kind of vulnerability. It's quite shaken. And her music just speared me straight away. And I can see the direct connection between her, the way she sings and the way Victor sang. I can see how it's very connected because they sing in the same register. So, and then I went and discovered a lot of her paintings. You know, I saw the achievement of how she was exhibited in the Louvre in kind of Paris, and just like, fucking hell, what a journey she had. Unbelievable. And then, you know, I started looking at this film that had been made about her, a biopic, and I couldn't really get a sense of what I was looking at. So I just went back and looked at her paintings and her songs again, and just realized that for her not to be in the record would have been wrong, because she's part of the reason why Victor flourishes, I think.
The next song on the album is Without Knowing the End, and in brackets it's called Joan's Song.
Yeah.
So there's two combining songs about the women in Victor's life, I reckon.
Yeah, no, I didn't want to put them next to each other, actually. But I didn't, because I just didn't want to put stylistic. I wanted Without Knowing the End to be next to Mimosa Tree, because they're so opposite. But it just couldn't work out like that. Yeah, this song, Without Knowing the End, was another song that came late on, but it was a lyric that Pat was working on for a long time. But I didn't write the music till towards the end of the record. And it is a song just about Joan Hara, his wife, who is an English lady, who had a very serious dance career in ballet, and was a very serious dancer, and was starting to teach. And then obviously she met Victor, and she was living in Santiago with him. And I think they were both teaching at the university in Santiago, and she became obsessed with trying to take ballet to the working class in and around Santiago and into the country as well. And I like that. I like that conviction where you can stand behind banners, you can write songs, you can write speeches. But I love the fact that she was taking the physical act of ballet to kids that had never even seen a fucking ballet. She was taking this movement, a physical act, to kids and saying, no, what about this? They would never thought about it. I love that commitment. She described trying to teach kids ballet in the street and seeing their feet bleed because they didn't have the conditions to do so. You know, they couldn't dance on panel floors, etc. It was on asphalt. It was on concrete. I love that. I love that kind of. I love that idea of just this slightly jarring image of Victor Jara in Peru with his guitar, Joan teaching ballet in the kind of the ghettos in Chile, kind of thing. I love the idea of these things where they went outside of their comfort zones. They really, really had commitment to what they believed. Had the kind of commitment which is hard for me to imagine at all. Just the act of just going to these places and trying to teach ballet and just trying to just convince people that it's a worthwhile thing to do. That's before they've even done the physical act of it. So the song was all about her, and the song was about her bravery. The song was about the fact that she leaves Chile after, Victor is murdered. She takes the children with her, and then she goes back to Chile. She doesn't abandon Chile. She is a very English lady, but she goes back to Chile and she still lives there to this day. She connected to the place. She lost in Chile. She faced murder in Chile. She suffered grief of the most terrible kind in Chile. But she still fucking went back and she still lives there to this day. So both of them, Victor and Joan, they show a commitment and a bravery which I don't think I've got in myself, really.
The next song on the album is called La Partida, and I believe it's a cover or a reimagination of Victor's song. Is that correct?
Oh, I'm not one of those modern motherfuckers that call something a reimagining.
Okay, good. We can call it a cover then.
Yeah. Because,
okay.
No, it's a cover. There was freedom. Basically, what I started with this, I did want a Victor Jara cover on the record. I wanted to sing one of his songs for obvious reasons because he inspires the old record, so I wanted to see what some of his music could inspire on our record, my record. But whenever I tried to sing one of his songs, it felt so bad. I tried to sing Manifesto, a song by Victor Jara. I tried to sing a song, Preguntas por Puerto Montt. I tried to sing a song called Recuerda Te Amanda, and it was awful when I tried to sing his songs. It made me an empty vessel. It made me sound ridiculous. I was singing it in English, but I just realized that I didn't have the experience. I didn't have the pain, the tragedy, the joy, the geography, the history. I rendered the words meaningless when I tried to sing those songs. And it was fucking embarrassing. And it was really quite disappointing too. Especially since I've got the reference of watching Bruce Springsteen sing Manifesto in Santiago. And he does a fucking amazing job of it. He does it, It helps if you're singing there in Santiago. But of course, Bruce Springsteen has got that weight of his voice. His voice is very different to mine. I sing higher, but he sings lower, and the power he has is something you can't describe. He's a different musician. So I abandoned that. And I was really disappointed. But I thought, well, I've got to try and include some of Victor's music on the record. So Victor recorded quite a lot of instrumentals. So I just chose the one that would give me most freedom. And La Partida is kind of sketchy, his version, the way he's recorded it. It's been recorded by other people. but I decided that had enough drama and enough freedom in it for me to kind of like, for me to go somewhere else with it, to express myself within his music, and get away with it. And I wanted some of his music on the record because I wanted money to go to his family or his foundation or whatever. I wanted at least something like that to happen with the record.
Track number 10 is not the last song on the album, but it is called The Last Song.
Yeah, the last song deals with how he must have felt as soon as he landed back from Peru, back into Chile. It's not necessarily about the last lyric that he wrote in the stadium that was passed on to other people and survived his murder. It's not particularly about that last day. But it's there are definitely elements of that is folded into the lyric, undoubtedly. But it's about that period from when he landed, and he's quoted as saying the era changed as soon as he landed. He knew something, was going to go either wrong or right in Chile. And the song is about that. It's about the last act, the last part of Victor's life in Chile, from when he lands back from Peru, and when he goes back to teaching college. And he's, every journey is essential, from home to the college, from college back to home. Everything is fraught with danger. Every day is fraught with danger from that day onward.
Yeah, I don't know if everyone listening to this knows the Chilean history in so much detail, but it's important to know that Allende, who was the president at the time and a good friend of Victor Jara,
yes,
was obviously getting into trouble because of the right-wing party, which was headed by Pinochet, who later overthrew the government with a military coup and murdered an unspeakable amount of people, including Victor Jara, in a imprisonment of a whole bunch of people in an arena in Santiago, in a football stadium. And that's what you were touching on, where he left last lyrics in a note. Yeah.
Because I think for the last 2-3 days of his life, he was in that stadium, or 2 days. And obviously they become aware, the soldiers and some of the captains in the stadium become aware that they've got a prize catch. They've got Victor Jara there. And so they start tormenting him in front of all the other people that are in the stadium. And they batter his hands, they put bullets in his hands, apparently. And in the end, he is killed. And they find something like 38 bullet holes in his body. And, and this, if anybody listens to this wants to go and read up on what some of the soldiers do to him, it's quite disturbing,
Yeah, you gotta have a strong stomach, yeah.
Yeah. And it's, you see it, and then you realize he's writing what he knows is his last song, so to speak, his last poem, wherever you want to call it, and he passes it on, and somebody else has passed it on to somebody else, and that lyric escapes the stadium, and it lives on, and it gets read out on a record by somebody called Adrian Mitchell on a record, and it becomes famous. So kind of there is a reference to that, but it is a reference. Mostly the song is the reference to the last act of Victor Jara's life, from when he lands back from Peru, and he knows that the kind of things are either going to go right or they're going to go wrong.
The final track on the album is called Santiago Sunrise.
Yeah.
To me, it kind of, but it's my interpretation, it kind of inspired a bit of hope as well.
Yeah, kind of the one thing I want to try and convey with the record is, like I said, it is an outsider's, a Northern European kind of view of this history and of this person and the people around him. But the one thing I want to try and convey was that even though kind of Victor Jara was on the left of politics, obviously. With the popular movement government of Allende, they were of the left. They wanted the people to own Chile, to participate in Chile. They didn't want like the soft power of America owning the copper and the tin of Chile, etc., etc. Which is a message that has been gone through decades and decades, isn't it? And for other countries too.
Yeah.
But kind of, even though Victor was on the left, I'm still always shocked by how his songs are much more inclusive than of somebody who just sings from the left. If you read his lyrics, he wants every Chilean to be a part of Chile. He wants every Chilean to listen to him, whether you be upper middle class or poor or peasant or working class or aspirant, kind of like, whatever. He wants Chile to be together, and he wants Chileans just to feel as if they're part of each other. It's always a message, or sometimes it's a message of inclusivity, of just being part of each other. And he tries, and with his songs, he tries to heal as well. He doesn't do what a lot of protest singers stereotypically do. He doesn't place himself in front of the subject or the opposition and say, fuck you, and say, you stand down, this is my message. He sings with a very much more conciliatory tone. He sings with a beautiful tone. He sings with a tone which I think is inspired by Violeta Parra, inspired by his mother. The actual way he sings and breathes, the actual way he plays, the way he writes. And kind of like, also, I think what really impresses me is that I think that small time he spent in seminary where he thought he might become a priest does affect his music. Even though there's no hint of him being that religious after that, I think that period of reflection is reflected in his music somewhat. And it all goes in the mix. And I think his way of conveying a message, despite his death, despite his murder, is really important, because you don't need an opposition to argue with somebody anymore. In Britain, people that are supposedly vaguely on the same side are intent on destroying each other. People in the left in Britain are just separating into different areas, and people in the Conservative government must just wake up and laugh every morning because they just look out their window and they just go, don't worry about them, they're all fighting each other, we're okay, kind of thing. And I think the one thing, if you listen to somebody like Victor Jara, would be like, you really got to pick your battles, you really got to try and be part of each other. And even though he was political and he was ideological, I don't deny that, he still was inclusive, and he didn't preach that you kind of go and hammer on somebody else's door and drag them out of their house, metaphorically or physically. And I think that's kind of important. So try to convey that the sentinels of his memory are, Violeta Parra, Allende, and the way he sang his songs. And people were singing his songs in Plaza Italia in Santiago a year ago. 5,000 people just singing Victor Jara songs. It just means that kind of, you cannot diminish the humanity of what he was and what his songs were.